Buenas, bienvenidos gente a un nuevo directo. Bienvenidos todos a un nuevo lanzamiento. Hoy estamos con un lanzamiento tripulado desde el Kennedy Space Center. Lanzamiento tripulado para SpaceX. Lanzamiento tripulado hacia la Estación Espacial Internacional. Primer astronauta ruso en viajar en una Crew-5 de SpaceX. ¿Qué más decir? Bienvenidos todos a un nuevo directo.
Following the crewed test flight Demo 2 and 4 previous operational crewed missions to the International Space Station. It will also be SpaceX's 8th crewed spaceflight overall,
Estamos en tiempo menos una hora para el despegue.
Today, our crew is flying on board Dragon Endurance. It will be the second flight for this capsule, and it will be taking a ride on a brand new Falcon 9. Now, it's been a great countdown so far. Weather, as Kate has been updating us with, is still good for T0, so the excitement just continues to pick up here as we get closer to that T0.
SpaceX Dragon in Section 6, Crew-5 is go for launch.
Copy that, Nicole. Crew-5 is go for launch.
And you just heard it yourself, Crew-5 is go for launch, another exciting milestone. We did start our coverage earlier today with the crew heading to the launch pad, and prior to that, the SpaceX team did help the crew put on their spacesuits and conduct initial checkouts before crew walkout. Crew walkout was where Nicole Mann, Josh Cassada, Koichi Wakata, and Anya Kikina gave final goodbyes with friends and family gathered outside the operations and checkout building before they began that roughly 20-minute ride to pad 39A.
And we were able to watch the crew as they boarded their Teslas and headed down the NASA Causeway, headed towards the launch pad. And once they arrived at the pad, the crew took a moment to enjoy the view of the vehicle as that they will be taking flight on this afternoon, and then headed up the fixed service structure to begin a process known as crew ingress, where the astronauts entered the Dragon spacecraft. The SpaceX team then performed a series of checks to ensure the suits, seats, and vehicle interactions were all functioning properly.
And a short time ago, the team did close out Dragon's hatch, and the crew is
No, gente, hay
inside.
go for launch.
So with less than
O
an
sea,
hour
es
to
go
go
para el
until
lanzamiento.
liftoff,
El
things
clima
will
es
continue to
90%
pick up as we get
favorable
close to the go
y ahora
no-go
mismo
pole to arm the
todos los
launch
sistemas están en
escape
verde,
system
por lo
and
cual hay
begin
un go
propellant loading.
para el despegue.
The crew poll
Recuerden
for
que se
readiness
estrena
was
la primera
completed at
etapa,
the
la
T-minus
B1077,
60-minute mark, and the Dragon
que si
poll
no mal
for
recuerdo
upload
antes de
is
ayer
coming
realizó
up
un
here
encendido
at
estático
T-minus
previo al
55 minutes.
lanzamiento,
After that, at
por obvias
T-minus
razones hizo la
45
etapa
minutes,
nueva
we'll begin the mission control Hawthorne poll, and
y
then the
resultó
launch readiness
exitosa.
poll for propellant
Así
loading.
de que bueno,
When we get to about T-minus 40 minutes, the crew
ahí
access
estamos
our
viendo
forward
la
track,
primera
and the
etapa
crew will get the call to
B1077 que se
close their
estrenará
risers
y
and
como
to
no con un
arm
vuelo
the launch
tripulado.
escape system. Now, this is the automated safety system in place that
Ya
can wire
comentaremos
the
los
asynchronous
astronautas
thrusters on
que viajarán a
Dragon
la
to
estación
quickly
espacial.
separate the crew
Ya
from the rocket,
comentaremos
either on the
bastantes
pad
cosas
or during the flight
de lo
on the
que
ride uphill.
falta de la cuenta,
And then once we reach about
regresiva.
T-minus
Ven, chévere.
35 minutes, propellant loading for the Falcon 9 will begin. So we did hear that the crew is go for launch. Great news. So with that, let's send it back to the team in Florida. Megan?
Great news, guys. So yeah, now I'm joined with Brian Oñate, but I'm going to have him say his title because I think
Bueno,
I'm
en
gonna mess it up.
tiempo
So you say what
menos
you are.
45 minutos más o menos, la torre de acceso para la tripulación es retraída para así dejar espacio a Falcon 9 para su despegue.
So I wanted to talk to you about how NASA has been studying plant growth and microgravity for many years now. So tell us about the two experiments that Crew-5 is going to be working on.
Bueno, para los que vieron el tweet que hice anteriormente, cuando anuncié que estábamos en tiempo de menos 2 horas, avisé que 15 y 30 horario universal, o sea, dentro de 25 minutos estaba iniciando directo, pero al final iniciamos antes, a las 15 UTC estábamos iniciando directo y bueno, vamos a disfrutar de este lanzamiento, de esta importantísima misión tripulada hacia la estación espacial. Esperemos que todo vaya bien y tengamos 4 nuevos tripulantes en la estación el día de mañana cuando se acople la cápsula.
So what we're noticing is in a previous experiment, the DNA of the plant actually changed, and it almost seemed like
Bueno, comentaremos un poco sobre el lanzamiento. Un poquito sobre cohete. La primera etapa es nueva, realizó ante la estación de encendido estático. Esta etapa es la B1077. Y bueno, como saben, la segunda etapa siempre es nueva, el Falcon 9. La Dragon es la Crew-5 Endurance, como se pronuncia, perdón.
How can we better prepare the plants that we send or the crops that we send up there so that they actually are ready to go
ahora mismo,
thrive and we understand what's happening so that the crew can actually consume something.
Acá en tiempo menos, estoy mirando acá el temporizador que tiene SpaceX en su web oficial. Dejo un poquito de volumen de que mi país está alto. Se escucha demasiado bajo el directo de la NASA, me dicen que le subo un poquito de volumen. Pero bueno, en tiempo menos 42 minutos para el despegue. El puente de acceso, como ven acá, no sé si ven el puntero, pero el puente de acceso para la tripulación se retrae, y se ve si el puntero, bien, se retrae para dejar espacio para Falcon 9, pero antes, en tiempo de unos 45 minutos, el director de vuelo verifica los sistemas y da el go o no go para empezar con la carga de propelente. Por ahora es todo go. Luego, en tiempo menos 37 minutos, se activa el sistema, el FTS, el sistema de finalización de vuelo. Pues si llega a ocurrir algo en la plataforma del lanzamiento o durante el despegue, la cápsula se separa del cohete y aterriza por medio de los paracaídas, haciendo que no sufra daño la cápsula ni la tripulación a bordo. Bueno, también, en tiempo de unos 35 minutos, la primera etapa se empieza a cargar con RP1 y oxígeno líquido. Bueno, a los 16 minutos para el despegue, la segunda etapa empieza su carga de combustible. Y a los 7 minutos, un Shine Chill por parte del Falcon 9, o sea, empiezan, a ver cómo lo puedo explicar bien. Los 9 motores de Falcon 9, se empiezan a enfriar preparándose para el lanzamiento. Luego, en tiempo de unos 5 minutos para el despegue, la Dragon se empieza a alimentar de sus baterías internas. En tiempo de unos 1 minuto, el comandante de vuelo da el go para el lanzamiento. Después también el Falcon 9 se empieza a alimentar de sus baterías internas y toma control de sí mismo de la cuenta regresiva. Y los tanques ya se empiezan a presurizar pronto para el despegue. El director de vuelo autoriza el lanzamiento en tiempo de unos 45 minutos, no tiempo de unos 1 minuto. Según la web de SpaceX. Bueno, después, en tiempo menos 3 segundos para el despegue, empieza la secuencia de encendido y en el tiempo de los 0 despega el Falcon 9. Bueno, se ha comentado el timelapse. Comentamos también que la primera etapa B1077 aterrizará sobre la barcaza Just Read Instruction, situada aproximadamente 640 kilómetros de las costas de Florida.
And now, next question at Mike Mangano, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, asked, and this is a fitting question for you, Bob. Did the NASA astronauts who fly the Dragon capsule help in the design of the capsule? Why, yes, they did, and that was you.
You know, it was an interesting experience, I think, for both Doug and I to have the opportunity to not only fly on a new spacecraft, but be a part of shaping it for crews to come forward. And I think as we went through that process, the SpaceX team really learned how to work with us and how to take our input.
Bueno, vamos a hablar un poquitito de la tripulación, que serán los 4 astronautas, serán 2 de la NASA, una mujer de Roscosmos y uno de la JAXA, de Japón. Ya serán 2 estadounidenses, un ruso, o sea, una rusa en este caso, y un japonés. Bueno, en el asiento número 1 tendremos al comandante Nicole Aunapu de la NASA. Después, como piloto de vuelo, tendremos a Josh Casada, también de la NASA. Luego, especialista en misión 1 sería Ana Kikina de Roscosmos. Y especialista en misión 2 sería Koichi Wakata de la JAXA. Espero haberlo pronunciado bien. Y bueno, el horario de despegue a las 16 UTC. Tiene bastante info ahí abajo en la descripción del directo. Y bueno, estamos en tiempo de unos 49 minutos.
All the operational activities, not only vehicle traffic and arrivals, but a spacewalk may impact things, or other activities that are happening on the ground, for example, might drive a schedule to be specific as well. But the crew's given time to recover after each of those sleep shifts.
Very good. And for those watching, if you want to ask a question of Bob Behnken, just follow us on Twitter at NASA Social, or check us out on the web at nasa.gov/social. Thanks for answering those questions, Bob. Great job. Let's send it now back out to Kate at SpaceX for an update on the countdown. Kate?
Always love hearing those responses from any astronaut, but especially Bob, because he flew on our DM2 mission a couple years ago. So at this point in time, we're now under an hour. We're at T-minus 48 minutes, and the SpaceX launch team is finishing the final review of data from checkouts of Falcon 9 over the last hour. The launch director has verified with the launch weather.
Bueno, tiempo de unos 48 minutos. En aproximadamente 5 minutos se retraerá la torre de acceso a la tripulación esta que estamos viendo acá. Ahí la vemos desde otro ángulo. Increíble esta cámara para ver el despegue.
The launch director, or LD, as you hear it called on the nets, also checks with the Dragon mission director, or MD, and the NASA launch manager to make sure that they are also ready. Earlier, you saw the vehicle assembly building called the VAB.
Hoy ya vemos los 4 astronautas que ya comentamos quiénes son los que viajarán en esta misión. También vemos la cápsula Dragon Endurance.
Now there on screen, you can see the Dragon capsule on the right-hand side. The crew access arm is still in the service position. I've recently heard that the closeout team has departed the tower, and they are in the process of departing the blast danger area. Now, with the crew on board Dragon, waiting for next instructions, which will be to stow the crew arm for launch. The crew arm sequence will be armed and initiated. We should get a good view of the access arm as it
Pigeon
swings.
Operators on countdown. Pulling is complete. The team has pulled go for crew access arm retract, LES arm, propellant load, and launch. For all operators in MCCX and firing room 4, both control rooms will go into lockdown at T-minus 45 minutes and will remain in that state until launch escape system is disarmed. All operators are to remain at their console, maintain a sterile cockpit until MD confirms successful disarming of the launch escape system, following orbit insertion or propellant offload in the event of a scrub. For non-urgent no-go conditions, brief the CE or LD, and they will approve aborting the countdown. For urgent issues affecting the safety of the operation, operators shall call hold, countdown net. Launch control will abort the launch auto sequence and immediately proceed into launch abort. At T-minus 10 seconds, launch control will be hands-off, relying on automated abort criteria for the remainder of the count. Operators advise the launch director whether structural breakup or fire is imminent or occurring per Dragon manual escape flight rules. Launch control at this time may proceed with arming the crew arm for movement.
Launch control copies, proceeding to arm crew arm for movement.
All right, quick recap there. All really good news. It sounds like the final poll has been conducted and all of the responsible engineers polled go, as well as the range they polled ready for launch, and the NASA team the NASA launch team is also ready for launch. So everything continuing to look good. We just heard there that the crew access arm will be armed for retraction, meaning it will move away from the Dragon capsule.
Crew access arm retraction started.
All right, and there we should get a view of that crew access arm now moving away from Dragon capsule. Again,
bueno, se retrae el puente de acceso.
This is the
El
final
go for
change
launch.
to the crew access arm, to the crew tower. Of course, the transporter erector will move away from the rocket as it lifts off and just shortly before liftoff. So that, in fact, will be the last
Aproxima
major physical
lanzamiento,
change
44 minutos.
but this crew access arm retraction is the final, will be the final state for the access arm for launch. This retraction should take about a minute to complete. Now, as I mentioned before, the range continues to be go for launch, monitoring the clearance area around the launch pad, as well as air and sea space around the flight corridor. And of course, here at Kennedy Space Center, as you see on your screen, the conditions are gorgeous. Everything continues to be acceptable for launch. Many things go into consideration, such as ground winds, any rain that might be in the area, as well as potential for lightning, any thick clouds, and of course, as I mentioned before, downrange landing zones. We have mentioned before that we've been tracking those, but everything continues to look green for launch. At this point in time, everything is looking on time for our liftoff at noon Eastern. We can see that crew access arm continuing to retract. Pretty cool shot there from inside the arm on the right-hand side of your screen as we see Dragon slowly move out of the frame. So with all that being said, the teams are ready. We will begin the propellant load at T-minus 35 minutes. And we are getting excited here at SpaceX headquarters. The energy is definitely starting to pick up outside of mission control. But with that, let's hand it off to Daryl to check in back over there at Kennedy Space Center.
All right, thank you, Kate. And back here on the lawn and the host desk, looking out at what one of my coworkers called a picnic vibe, with the media and NASA social folks all joined here to watch Crew-5 launch in just
Crew
about
access
42
arm
minutes.
retraction complete.
And there you heard confirmation.
Bueno, se completó
That crew
la
access
retracción
arm
del puente de
has
acceso para
fully
la
retracted
tripulación.
from the rocket. A gorgeous shot there from our flight operations team here at the Kennedy Space Center, a helicopter encircling the pad right now to give you that view. Great job, fellas. T-minus 42 minutes and counting as we zip around Launch Complex 39A. The background, the launch tower for Dragon, and in the foreground, a Starship launch tower under construction. Up next, we're looking at the launch escape system getting ready to arm, and of course that comes right before we start loading propellant. We're expecting to hear those call-outs in just a bit. On a beautiful bluebird day at the Kennedy Space Center. Our crew, Crew-5, is in their seats at the very top of that rocket, inside the capsule Endurance, making its second flight. There they are, from left to right.
Perdón si se vio eso de OBS.
Nicole Mann,
Pero aquí estoy buscando. Estoy
And they're
confiando en
getting
una
into
cosa.
position to begin their procedure that'll have them arming that launch escape system that you mentioned. They'll be able to hear some clicking of valves and follow along on their display screen as once they've kicked off that procedure, as the vehicle kind of catches up and completes that arming sequence. And as you know, once the fueling operations begin, the crew has to be ready to potentially launch somewhere if there was some sort of a problem. And so that launch escape system needs to be in place and armed in preparation for that fueling operation to begin. That system will stay armed throughout the ascent phase until the crew is actually safely in orbit, allowing them a safe way to escape from the Falcon 9 rocket should there be any sort of a problem with the vehicle.
And we're expecting to see the astronauts close their visors and arm the launch escape system that you just talked about, Bob, here in a little over a minute. We'll get the call out from the launch team.
You'll also see them ensure that their feet are in the appropriate locked-in position, their straps are tight, because again, should that system be required, they might be going for a pretty significant dynamic ride. But of course, we don't expect that to happen today, but they'll have that system in place just in case as the appropriate safety measure.
Yeah, Bob, that launch escape system, powered by Super Draco engines, capable of moving Dragon a half a mile in just 7.5 seconds, which is equivalent to a peak velocity of 436 miles per hour. I know you know this system well. You were very much briefed and very aware of its capabilities. You want to be able to not only get off the launch pad, but also get off the rocket while in flight. So it's got to move fast.
Absolutely, Daryl. And for shuttle systems, the crew would really have to do a lot of manual activities to steer the vehicle through the appropriate escape or abort scenarios, as we talked about them in those days. But this system is highly automated, and the crew primarily follows along with its operations.
Dragon, you are go for Section 7 of 4.100 to close visors and arm the launch escape system.
SpaceX Dragon copies stepping into Section 7. All crew visors are closed. We are arming the launch escape system.
SpaceX copies all.
Me quedó un poquito mal de tamaño el segundo marco, pero ya lo voy a arreglar.
Their visors are closed, and they are ready to arm the launch escape system.
And you can see the crew members pulling their straps and ensuring that they are.
Ahí tenemos la ubicación de la Estación Espacial Internacional.
That relaxation period that I talked about earlier is now over.
Tenemos ahí el marco.
Yeah, it's all business now. Want to make sure
bien puesto.
In your seat,
bien.
Firm and tight for the operation of
bueno, el asiento de órbita es bien por encima de Florida. Y ahí es cuando se va a lanzar el Falcon 9.
Capture the tones. On countdown 1, launch escape system is verified armed.
All right, we got the verification of the armed escape system.
So from a training perspective, the sounds and things that the crew will hear during the loading operation are just different than they're able to capture from a training perspective. And so now's when it starts to, again, be a little bit different from a crew perspective.
There's no simulating that system.
There is some acoustics that they tried to capture.
Falcon 9 tanks will be venting for the start of prop load. Expect loud venting.
That they tried to capture with the Demo 1 audio, if you will. But as you heard in the comm that just came through there, you need to get reminded to expect loud venting during some of the operations. And these are new things from a crew perspective that you've been briefed on, but now you're going to hear them for the first time.
3 of the 4 crew members inside that capsule right now have never flown to space before. They are first-time flyers. The lone exception.
Bueno, inició la carga de propelente en la primera etapa.
And he's getting ready to embark on his 5th flight to space. And as we wait for the next mark,
the crew's experience, whether it's a space shuttle or a Soyuz or the Dragon vehicle or Starliner or Artemis, as we move towards that, these experiences are all slightly different. And so I'm excited to hear, Koichi's discussion as he tries to balance and describe all 3 of them side by side when he gets back from this mission.
Would love to hear him talk about the comparisons. There's only a few astronauts like him, right, that have been able to fly on all 3 vehicles.
Yes, and as we go forward here with the Artemis missions coming forward, I'm excited to have folks compare and contrast their Orion experience, their SLS experience with Falcon 9 or our other rockets.
That's going to be fun. Just a few seconds now, and we're awaiting the confirmation to the beginning of loading propellant into the Falcon 9 rocket. A beautiful shot there as we encircle the launch pad.
Estamos en tipo menos 35 minutos para el despegue. Actualmente Go for Launch, la torre de acceso se retrajo, la carga de propelente en el Falcon 9 inició. ¿Qué más? El sistema FTS, si no se activó, se estará por activar en la cápsula Dragon. O sea, por si cualquier cosa sucede, la cápsula pueda separarse del Falcon 9 y no poner en riesgo a la tripulación.
Liquid oxygen and RP1. Got your propellant and your oxidizer, which blended together make quite the combustion. Millions of pounds of thrust to get Crew-5 into space.
You know, there are a lot of details to that operation, Daryl, with each of the stages, and as you mentioned, the oxidizer and the fuel both needing to be loaded, and so the crew will follow along with that carefully.
Increíble imagen de la plataforma SL-139A del Centro Espacial Kennedy.
The crew would expect that propellant loading to kind of be backed out and reversed, and so they'll want to understand the state of that fueling operation going forward, just in case they had to back out of it.
And we've got a social question now from @Grant B117, who asks, how long does it take to complete the fueling operations?
No, it's a great question, Daryl, and they started it at 35 minutes because that's really prior to liftoff, because that's how long it takes for the loading operations to kind of get executed. The crew goes through the process, the ground team, of loading that propellant, ensuring that they get the proper commodities on board. The actual sequencing of things might be affected a little bit by the temperature on a given day, but they have that process well monitored, and they begin at 35 minutes because that's how long it takes to get the rocket all fueled up.
Thank you for answering those questions, and to you out there for asking the questions. Keep them coming. #AskNASA on our various social platforms. And again, now that fueling for Falcon 9 has started, that means the 8 Super Draco engines inside Crew Dragon are ready, if needed, to launch the capsule away from Falcon 9 in an instant, should there be any kind of emergency associated with the rocket or the pad. The NASA and SpaceX teams have trained extensively for exactly that type of contingency. And so now let's go over to Kate Tice at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne for another operations update. Kate?
Thanks, Daryl. You can probably tell by the background noise that things are starting to get more exciting now that we're just practically 30 minutes away from launch of Crew-5, certainly counting down the final minutes. Everything's still looking good for Falcon 9 and Dragon. With that launch escape system now armed, we are heading for an on-time launch just
32 minutos para el despegue.
As you saw, Falcon 9 propellant load began right on time at T-minus 35 minutes. The first and second stages of Falcon 9 are each loaded with 2 liquid propellants. One is fuel, which is loaded into a tank at the bottom of each stage, and the other is an oxidizer, and that's loaded into a tank.
Ahí vemos que está en progreso la carga de combustible. En este caso es de la primera etapa, la B1077, que se estrenará con este lanzamiento. Cuando nos queda un poquito más de media hora para el despegue.
Densified means that it's kept much colder than typical for launch vehicles, and it takes up less volume. And as such, this allows for more oxidizer to be loaded into the first and second stages. Now, to ignite the fuel and oxidizer in the Merlin rocket engine, we use an ignition fluid called TTEB. When TTEB comes into contact with oxygen, it burns, giving off a green-colored flame. Once we have that flame going, we add in the kerosene fuel to the Merlin chamber, and the engine ramps up to full power. You might actually be able to see that green flash just as the second stage engine ignites following stage separation, which is expected to happen about 2 minutes and 48 seconds into flight. Right now, we're topping off helium into pressure vessels on both stages. This is used to pressurize tanks in flight as propellant is pulled out of those tanks by the Merlin turbopumps. Now, on board the spacecraft, the astronauts are monitoring systems from their crew monitors.
Stage 1 cryo-helium loading has started.
All right, there we just heard that the cryo-helium load has begun. Again, that is going into those pressure vessels that I mentioned earlier. Now, the crew training simulator has included playback of the sounds that were recorded in a previous Dragon capsule.
O sea, ¿se escucha abajo el directo? Bueno, aumentamos un poquito el volumen.
That the vehicle puts out all
A ver ahí
has
si
heard
se
those
está
before,
escuchando
though
bien el
not
directo
live.
de la
So we
NASA.
are prepared for all the noises, the extra noises that they're now hearing. As for the range, continues to report no problems. They are go to support launch. Weather also clearly looking great. I think we're actually seeing even fewer clouds than we were about 20 minutes ago. We had a less than 10% chance or probability of violation of our weather constraints, also known as a POV. So that's really good. That is for the launch site conditions. We are also tracking downrange weather conditions as well as launch sites around the world in the unlikely event that Dragon needs to escape. Now, as a reminder, today we have an instantaneous launch time because we're heading to the International Space Station. So at this point in time, if we hear a hold for any reason, we will have to stand down and target our backup launch opportunity, which is tomorrow, just under 24 hours from today's planned launch. At this point in time, at just under T-minus 30 minutes till launch, let's turn it back over to Jesse and Sandra for an overview of what's to come until liftoff.
Great. Thanks, Kate. Always great to hear that we've got good weather and it looks beautiful over there at KSC. For Crew-5, the astronauts' flight to station will take about 29 hours.
And as we await T0 in just about 28 minutes from now, the ground operations team is doing a series of system checks to make sure both Dragon and Falcon 9 are ready for launch. You're looking at a live view of our teams at the Cape as they prepare for liftoff. And as we wait for the launch clock to hit 0, we want to give you an overview of what the ascent portion of the mission will look like.
Now, once we hit T0 and a successful launch occurs, we will watch Falcon 9 and Dragon lift off from historic launch pad 39A and make their ascent.
About 50 seconds into flight, Falcon's 9
Bueno, ahí estamos
engines will
viendo
throttle down to
cómo sería el lanzamiento
de
a la misión.
or what we typically
Muy buena
refer to
animación
as
que
max Q. At this point in time, the vehicle will be going supersonic.
And once we're through the period of maximum dynamic pressure, we can throttle up our 9 Merlin engines again. From there, at about 2.5 minutes into flight, we have a series of 3 events that will happen in rapid succession.
The first is MECO, or main engine cutoff, and this is where all 9 Merlin 1D engines shut off in preparation for stage separation, which is, of course, our second event. This is where the first stage detaches from the second stage, and the first stage will make its way back to Earth for landing, while the second stage continues on its journey with the third event, which is SES-1, or second stage engine start number 1, and this is where the MVAC engine lights up and propels the second stage along with our Crew-5 astronauts to orbit.
As Stage 2 heads towards its targeted drop-off orbit, Stage 1 will execute 2 burns in order to make its way back down to Earth. The first is the entry burn, and that's where 3 of the 9 M1D engines will reignite and shut down, and this helps to slow the stage down in preparation for entry back into the Earth's atmosphere.
While the first stage is heading back to Earth, the second stage will cut off its 1 Merlin engine that was ignited right after stage separation. Once this happens, we will wait for confirmation of a good orbital insertion.
About 90 seconds after Dragon gets into orbit, Falcon 9 will land back on Earth. The landing burn is just a single engine burn, powerful enough to bring the vehicle's speed down rapidly in order to touch down on the drone ship at about 9.5 minutes into the mission.
While Falcon 9's first stage is landing, Dragon is preparing to separate from the second stage. About 3 minutes after the second stage gets into orbit, we should have a great view of Dragon with its 4-person crew drifting away from the second stage. Once Dragon is a short distance away, it will begin checking out its Draco maneuvering thrusters to make sure Dragon continues to increase separation distance from the second stage. And it is worth noting that these are not the Super Draco engines that would be used during an abort scenario.
About 40 seconds after separation, Dragon's nose cone deploy sequence will begin. It will take roughly 4 minutes for the nose cone hooks to unlatch and open, exposing its guidance navigation controls that will help Dragon autonomously fly to the
Bueno, estamos en tiempo de unos 25 minutos para el despegue. Ya vimos la secuencia de lanzamiento a la derecha de la pantalla de la transmisión.
From there, over the next 29 hours, Dragon will be in its rendezvous and approach phases, undergoing a number of phasing burns as it makes its way back to station. All that will be coming up soon, but for now, let's check back in with Shaniqua in Mission Control Houston. Shaniqua?
Thanks, Sandra. The flight controllers here in Mission Control Houston are laser focused on the onboard systems of the space station, making sure it is ready to receive Dragon vehicle tomorrow. They're also making sure communication links between the station, Dragon, and the ground are working properly. The consensus right now is that everything is proceeding nominally. Teams here in Mission Control Houston, the teams in Hawthorne, and the astronauts aboard the space station will monitor the autonomous docking of the Dragon spacecraft tomorrow evening. They'll perform a series of leak checks, then work to open the hatches both on the Dragon side and inside the space station's pressurized mating adapter. We expect hatch opening to take place around an hour and a half after docking. And once aboard, the astronauts will be greeted by Station Commander Samantha Cristoforetti. And then the whole station will
Vale, me acabo de dar cuenta que se detuvo la cuenta regresiva.
to the new crew members.
Pasó.
Now, due to critical science, this welcoming remarks will be about 90 minutes after the crew is on board. Once on board, the crew members will no longer be referred to as Crew-5, but rather as flight engineers of the International Space Station. Here in Mission Control, Flight Director Greg Whitney is on console overseeing the team for launch, and he will be back tomorrow for docking. We'll be on air continuously through Crew-5's arrival, but live coverage of docking is expected tomorrow around 4:57 p.m. Eastern Time. That's it from now from Mission Control.
En teoría es ventana instantánea, por lo cual
Daryl, how's it looking?
ya se cancela.
Wish you could be here. We got picnic weather out here at the press site and Launch Complex 39, where we are looking out for the launch of Crew-5 from historic Launch Complex 39A, a beautiful sweeping shot of the lawn where we have our special guests. The media are here. We've got NASA social folks who are out on the lawn, and of course, me and Bob. Bob's riding shotgun here as we take our coverage to the next level at the final 23
La cuenta regresiva sigue en pie, como ven allí en el fondo. Pero la cuenta regresiva del directo se pausó. Entreverado ya.
Inside the Dragon Endurance at the very top of this rocket here. We are listening in to the communications as they talk live to the Falcon 9 team. The rocket is fueling. The operation is doing well. And the launch escape system is
¿Se lanza o no se lanza?
That means Dragon is prepared
Mi
to launch
pregunta.
himself away from the Falcon 9 rocket in case of an emergency on the pad or after liftoff. So far, operations looking and sounding as expected. And we are counting down to our liftoff at just after noon, 12 p.m. and 57 seconds after the hour Eastern time. There was a 1 second adjustment. That's pretty typical, as happens when we get to this stage of the mission. The mission is the continuation of rotational crew flights to the
La cuenta regresiva sigue en pie.
from U.S. soil on private rockets
O sea,
and spacecraft.
es go para el lanzamiento.
Have been possible without the
Ya me había
success
asustado.
of the NASA SpaceX
Estamos
Demo 2
viendo ahí
test
que la
flight.
cuenta regresiva
Now, 2 years
sigue en pie
ago,
para el despegue del Falcon 9.
safe delivery and
Le quedan 21 minutos.
1, 2, 3, and eventually here in about a week, Crew-4. Of course, we're happy to have the pilot from Demo 2, and that's Bob Binkin. Appreciate you being here, been giving us some great thoughts and explanations about everything that's been happening.
Well, thank you, Daryl. I'm super excited to be here for Crew-5 and get a chance to relive my experience during the Demo 2 mission.
And it's been a great one so far. We've watched the crew get into the capsule. We've watched, they worked through a couple of issues early on, but those have been cleared. A suit leak check and a hatch leak check that had to be double checked. Now we're rolling along and moving towards...
O justo cuando puse mi cuenta regresiva, la NASA reanuda la suya. Así que bueno, estamos a 20 minutos para el despegue. Go for launch por ahora. En unos minutos iniciará la carga de propelente en la segunda etapa. Y ya falta cada vez menos para ver el despegue. Increíble.
For the stage 2 liquid oxygen load.
Otra quitaron la cuenta regresiva, ahí está. Me estoy asustando, en serio. No lo digo en broma, me estoy asustando.
It's not an exact science, but once it completes, we'll hear that call out.
Stage 2, RP1 load is complete.
Bueno, ahí vemos el típico venting del Falcon 9 en tiempo de unos 20 minutos para el lanzamiento.
If you're just joining us, we have a 4-person crew we call Crew-5, and it's commanded by Nicole Mann. She holds a Master of Science in Mechanical Engineering and is a colonel in the Marine Corps. She was an FA-18 Hornet and Super Hornet test pilot and deployed twice aboard aircraft carriers in support of combat operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. Nicole was selected by NASA in June of 2013, and in the years that followed, led the astronaut corps in the development of hardware for our Artemis program. Today, the Crew-5 commander will be flying into space for the first time, and once she reaches space, she will be the first Native American woman to stay on station. A historic first for NASA and for her.
Absolutely, Daryl. The astronaut corps is a widely
Bueno,
diverse, and I'm
momentáneamente estamos a 19 minutos, ahí vemos el venting de tiempo de los 20.
With her is pilot Josh Cassidy. He grew up in Bear Lake, Minnesota.
Y que bueno,
The physicist and U.S. Navy test pilot flew the
estoy viendo a la tripulación que viajará en esta misión.
as well as 23 combat missions.
Los casada de pilotos de la misión parte de la NASA.
Cassidy is one of more than 100 graduates who have become astronauts, going all the way back to the Mercury program. More recently, he served as capsule communicator and mission control, but today he is the pilot aboard Dragon.
It's a seat I know well, and I look forward to seeing Josh support Nicole and the rest of the crew on their way towards the International Space Station.
The mission specialist now, Koichi Wakata.
De venting, la verdad. Bueno, ahí vemos a Koichi Wakata, especialista de misión para la misión Crew-5. Actualmente estuvo en las misiones STS-72, 92, 119 y 127. En algunas Soyuz estuvo, también llegué a leer. Claro, rápido el cartel. Ya un astronauta con bastante experiencia en el espacio ya. Y ahora tendrá un vuelo más. La misión Crew-5, que será la misión de Crew de la Estación Espacial, duran aproximadamente 6 veces.
Our second mission specialist is Roscosmos cosmonaut Anna Kikina. She graduated from the Novosibirsk State Academy of Water Transport.
Más o menos entre abril y mayo estarían volviendo esta tripulación. Ahí vemos a la astronauta de Roscosmos, primera vez que viaja en una Crew Dragon. Bueno, ya presentaron los 4, me pasó uno.
Now each of these 4 crew members will be part of Expedition 68.
No sé qué comentar, estamos a tiempo de los 17 minutos para el despegue. Momentáneamente Go for Launch. Y que bueno, falta menos para el despegue. Ahí ven los radioaficionados, la frecuencia de radio para escuchar la visión, me imagino que será. Yo tomo captura por si acaso. Bueno, inició la carga de propelente en la segunda etapa. Y en menos de 7 horas tendremos otro lanzamiento por SpaceX. Y sigue todo go, tendremos lanzamiento desde la costa este, desde en este caso.
T-minus 16 minutes away from launch, and everything continues to look great for Falcon 9 and Dragon. Falcon 9 began prop load at T-minus 35 minutes. The loading of RP1 fuel on the second stage is complete. That finished at T-minus 20 minutes. Fuel loading continues on the first stage. It is almost complete. That should be wrapping up here momentarily. Densified liquid oxygen loading is underway on both the first and second stages. Those look to be about 80% on the first stage and
Bueno, 15 minutos.
just recently begun on the second
15 minutos para el despegue. Falta menos. Falta menos, gente.
At T-3 minutes and T-2 minutes respectively. Now, as for checkouts of thrust vector controllers, what we call TVC wiggles, those are coming up. We basically check to make sure that the thrust vector controllers are able to actuate the engines themselves. That's what helps create gimbal for those engines, and gimbaling is actually how Falcon 9 steers itself. So those are coming up along with throttle valve checkouts on the engines. The Dragon mission director and team are currently reporting no issues, so really good on that front. Communication checkouts are complete. The crew access arm is retracted, as we can see there, and the crew is strapped in and ready to go, as you can see there on the right-hand side of your screen. Everybody continuing to monitor prop load there on their crew monitors. Now, final instructions to the crew come at T-10 minutes.
Bueno, tiempo de unos 14 minutos para el despegue.
This setup gives the crew insight into how the launch is proceeding and provides constant updates on vehicle health. At T-5 minutes, we'll hear the call out that will be in terminal count, and at that point, Dragon will transition to internal power. We'll hear continued call outs on the countdown nets as we get closer to liftoff. As for range, they continue to be go, continuing to monitor the launch corridor, and everything remains green. As for weather, we're looking at 7-mile-per-hour winds at the launch site, and as I said before, as the countdown continues, we are seeing fewer and fewer clouds. Just an absolutely stunning day there at Kennedy Space Center. Let's check back in with Daryl to see the last couple minutes prior to liftoff.
Thanks, Kate, and it really couldn't be more perfect out here weather-wise for a launch. How about that, Bob?
It just looks absolutely stunning to look out and see the vehicle ready to go, the crew on board, strapped in. I'm just super excited for them.
And there's a view of the countdown clock and the historic American flag that has been standing there since the Space Shuttle program. Now you're looking at a pic of Crew-5. Crew-5 flying aboard the Dragon capsule Endurance, and the booster that you see behind them that they're posing with is a brand new one. Actually was damaged in transit from California to Texas, but it was fixed, repaired. Crew did a great job, the SpaceX team, in getting it all ready. And at the time that Falcon 9 launches Dragon to space, the International Space Station will be 260 statute miles over Australia. Crew-5 will then spend the next 21 hours with Mission Control Team that you see there in Houston, standing by, getting ready for the beginning of this mission. We'll spend 21
Bueno, estamos tiempo menos 12 minutos para el despegue. Se viene el momento.
For a rendezvous at 4:57 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow evening. One of the longer transits, Bob.
It's true. It's a little bit longer than usual, or average, I would say, as we work towards Crew-5. But as the launch dates shift around, that changes the time that you can actually arrive.
Ahora sí, 12 minutos exacto para el
They've got
despegue.
plenty of consumables, so it should be fun to have some time in space.
And when they arrive tomorrow evening, we'll have live coverage on NASA TV of docking, as well as the Crew-5 welcome ceremony at 8:15 p.m. Eastern Time, 7:15 p.m. Central. And some final thoughts, Bob, as we get ready to watch Crew-5 launch into space.
You know, my opportunity to sit here and watch Crew-5 go has just been inspiring again to see another vehicle head towards the International Space Station. Again, I'm excited for them and just hopeful that Nicole, Josh, Koichi, and Anna have just a wonderful
Bueno,
mission.
11 minutos para el despegue de la misión Crew-5.
And that's what we're rooting for here. And so with T-minus 11 minutes and counting, we're going to spin our chairs around and watch the launch. But we're going to let Kate and the team focus on the pad as we proceed through the final stretch of the countdown.
A ver si puedo ponerle el audio 2.0 para en velocidad 2.0 para disminuir el
Thanks, Daryl. As you can
delay.
probably tell by the background noise, the crowd is definitely growing here at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. Certainly one of our company traditions is to watch the launch itself.
Ahí vemos el centro de control de SpaceX, la cantidad de gente que está atrás observando.
Hawthorne, or as you sometimes hear referred to as MCCX. And then, of course, a crowd of employees watching
viene
from
gente,
behind.
10 minutos.
I also stand there if I'm not doing the webcast, so I can confirm it's a great spot to watch launch. Like I said, as you can see, the energy is certainly starting to grow now that we're about to hit T-minus 10 minutes. Beautiful view there of Falcon 9 and Dragon on the pad, ready to take Crew-5 to space.
We did discuss
Dragon, SpaceX, confirm crew displays are configured for launch.
Bueno, go for launch.
Let's go. We would like to give a huge thanks to the NASA and SpaceX team, the thousands of people for their development, preparation, and training in getting Endurance and Crew-5 to the launch pad today, and your continued support in helping to make this a successful mission. We look forward to joining the rest of our Expedition 68 crew members aboard the International Space Station. And a special thanks on behalf of all the crew to our family and friends. It is your love and support that help make dreams come true. Now let's do this. Crew-5 displays are configured for launch.
Copy, and Nicole, Josh, Koichi, and Anna, on behalf of the entire team at SpaceX, good luck, Godspeed, and enjoy the ride.
And those words from Nicole Mann, the first female commander of a Dragon, as she thanked the many folks that have helped get them to this point. We're now less than 9 minutes away from launch today. Upon liftoff, you'll hear a number and letter combinations which mark different abort zones throughout the flight, as well as some performance calls. The first two are 1A and 1B, and those signify the first stage and will last up to the very north tip of North Carolina. The next are 2A through 2E, and those will come into play once the second stage kicks in, lasting from the top of North Carolina all the way to the tip of Newfoundland in the northern Atlantic. You'll also hear a spot that is to be avoided, and you might hear Shannon or forward to Shannon, and that actually refers to Shannon, Ireland, meaning they would target off the east coast of Ireland if they were later in that second stage and did need to abort for some reason. So the next major milestone that we're looking towards will come just seconds from now, and that will be when engine chill begins on the first stage of the engine.
That's right. So engine chill is basically when we take a little bit of that super chilled densified liquid oxygen and we flow it through the turbo pumps of the Merlin M1D engines on the first stage. This helps to prepare the turbo pumps and avoid any thermal shock to the hardware when they see the full flow of liquid oxygen during ignition. We're also expecting the conclusion of prop load for the RP1 on first stage to wrap up at T-minus 6 minutes. LOX load continues to be underway on both first and second stages, again wrapping those at T-minus 3 minutes and 2 minutes.
And
Bueno,
after that, we'll hear
7 minutos,
call-outs
7 minutos
related
para el
to
despegue
Dragon's
de la
flight
misión
computer. Some will be
Crew-5 por parte de SpaceX y la NASA.
And you did just hear that call out that stage 1 engine chill has begun. Coming up in just about 45 seconds, we should expect to hear that RP1 load is complete. RP1 load is that densified kerosene or rocket fuel that will help propel the crew into orbit. All of that RP1 is loaded into the first stage, and we are standing by to hear that it was loaded into the second stage as well.
Again, we expect that to wrap at T-minus 6 minutes. The venting that you see on screen is totally normal. That is just some
Stage 1, RP1 load is complete.
Great news there that RP1 load is now finished. As I was saying, the venting that you see on the vehicle is totally normal. That's just some of the super chilled densified liquid oxygen just vaporizing as it comes into contact and vents from the vehicle.
And coming up, we'll also hear the call for Dragon to configure for terminal count, and then it will be transferred over to internal power, and then we'll hear that propellant tanks on Falcon 9 are getting ready to pressurize, which helps add some additional rigidity and structural support. as we get ready for strong back retract.
That strong back will retract a couple of degrees at first, and then we will see it swing open completely just shortly or at the moment of liftoff.
Tanks will be pressurizing for strong back retract.
And there's that indication that we are preparing for that strong back retraction.
Coming up in just a few seconds, we should hear that Dragon is in terminal count.
Dragon is in configured for terminal
5
count.
minutos para el despegue de la misión Crew-5.
All right, there we heard that call. Dragon onboard computers have now taken control of the vehicle. As I mentioned before, first stage LOX or liquid oxygen loading is underway and will wrap up at T-minus 3 minutes. The second stage will wrap its LOX load at T-minus 2 minutes. Launch teams continue to report no issues and everything remains green and for an on-time launch.
Retract has started.
And here in just a couple seconds, you might be able to see the strong back arm as it does begin to retract. As Kate said, it will recline 2 degrees.
We can just barely make out the clamp arms are now beginning to move. All right, now that those clamp arms are removed, as Sandra said, this will retract by 2 degrees, and then at liftoff, the strong back will retract another to 45 degrees, allowing Falcon 9 to clear.
Bueno, tiempo unos 3 minutos con 40. Viene el despegue.
And the transporter erector is what provides the liquids, the gases, the electrical connections to the vehicle. It's also what we use to integrate the vehicle in its horizontal position, and we can see that 2-degree retraction just now complete.
And the next call out that we should hear in about
Ahí
20
viene.
seconds is that the first stage LOX load is complete.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
And there we go, all of the oxidizer loaded on stage 1. Soon we'll hear that stage 2 LOX load is complete, and that will be the last propellant call out we'll hear today. Now less than 3 minutes until launch.
Dragon is in terminal count and is on internal power.
All right, there we heard the good news that Dragon is now on internal power. Again, the white clouds that you see there at the base of the Dragon trunk, totally normal. That's just the vapor from the liquid oxygen.
Bueno, 2 minutos.
Again,
Se empieza a sentir
second
los
stage now
nervios.
wrapping up its LOX load. Excuse me, first stage wrapping up its LOX load just a few minutes ago, and now moving toward wrap up of second stage LOX load, which will complete at T-minus 2 minutes.
Coming up on 2 minutes until liftoff, standing by for word that stage 2 LOX load has been completed.
Dragon is in auto idle. Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
There we heard the call out. Falcon 9 is now completely fueled. All of its propellants, so
are starting. Expect loud ending.
all of its
Bueno,
propellants, and we can see that
1 minuto y medio.
leftover liquid
Ahí vemos
oxygen
bastante venting.
now being vented or released.
La torre de lanzamiento ya se retrajo. En unos minutos.
Of liquid oxygen in RP1 now
Sí.
on board Falcon 9.
Bueno, y se viene el despegue en 1 minuto.
And ready for launch.
Creo que falta tampoco ya.
And coming up at T-minus 1 minute, we'll hear that Dragon is in countdown. Its flight computer will switch to countdown mode, and we'll hear that the flight termination system on Falcon 9 is armed.
1 minuto. 1 minuto para el despegue.
And there you
Bueno, ahora
have it,
mismo
Dragon's
Falcon 9 ya toma control de la cuenta regresiva de sí mismo. Empieza a alimentar su batería interna. Se viene al despegue.
We get the final go for launch from SpaceX launch director Mark Surtis.
40 segundos. Se viene. Se viene.
Dragon, go for launch.
Go for launch.
SpaceX reports go. Crew reports
Bueno, en
go.
30 segundos
30 seconds until liftoff.
vamos a meter el audio más alto. Se viene.
T-minus 15. 10. 9.
Vamos.
8. 7. 6. 5. 4. 3. 2. 1. Ignition.
And lift off. Despegue. Increíble, épico. Oh. Lanzamiento en una nueva misión tripulada.
Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
Vehicle is pitching downrange. Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
Buena imagen esta. Me gusta. Ahí vemos ya el Falcon 9 a 2,5 kilómetros de altura.
5 seconds into the 5th rotational crew mission on board Dragon and Falcon 9.
Coming up in just a few seconds, we'll hear the call out for stage 1 throttle down.
Stage 1 throttle down.
Bueno, el Falcon 9 va llegando a los 1.000 kilómetros por hora.
Through the period of maximum dynamic pressure.
This period is known as max Q, and once the vehicle... There we just heard that the vehicle is now traveling faster than the speed of sound. Once through max Q, we'll throttle those Merlin engines back up.
Bueno, ahora mismo está pasando por max Q, un momento de mayor presión aerodinámica, donde el vehículo sufre mayor estrés estructural. Un momento muy crítico para el lanzamiento.
Copy 1 Bravo.
That call out for 1 Bravo means we're in the second and final abort mode for the first stage, continuing to get good performance. The crew is already pulling over 2 Gs. And next up is going to be a couple of events in rapid succession. First will be engine chill on the second stage and back engine. And there you heard that call out. And then we'll have MECO, or main engine cutoff, where the 9 engines igniting will cut off in preparation for second stage separation. Then we'll see the single Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage ignite and continue to carry the Crew-5 astronauts to orbit.
Just like we did on first stage, that MVAC chill is intended to help pre-chill the hardware prior to the full flow of that densified liquid oxygen.
Bueno, se viene apagado de los 9 motores Merlin 1D de la primera etapa. Preparación de ambas etapas y encendido del motor principal de la segunda etapa, que es un Merlin 1D optimizado para el vacío. Había olvidado más volumen. Ahora sí.
Standing by for MECO.
Ahí está, apagado de los 9 motores Merlin 1D. Preparación de ambas etapas confirmada. Y se viene el encendido del motor principal de la segunda etapa, un Merlin 1D optimizado para el vacío. Encendido exitoso. Bien. Ahora, mientras la segunda etapa se dirige a órbita, rumbo a los 27.000 kilómetros por hora, la primera etapa, como está desplegando la rejilla aerodinámica, y se empieza a guiar para realizar su aterrizaje sobre la barcaza Just Read Instruction, JRTI, ubicada aproximadamente a 640 kilómetros de las costas de Florida.
First stage on the left-hand side of your screen, making its way back to Earth. We will be attempting to land it on our drone ship, which today we are using Just Read the Instructions.
Acquisition signal, bring it up.
And we did hear that acquisition of the ground station in Bermuda. The first stage is continuing to make its way back to Earth. And the second
Ahí
stage
estamos
is
viendo las
going to
costas
continue.
de Florida desde la primera etapa.
Another good call, trajectory nominal.
No tenemos la telemetría de la primera etapa. Así que bueno, pero tenemos la telemetría de la cápsula Dragon.
It also looks like you can actually see the thrust plume created by the first stage as it's now rotating just out of screen.
second stage is going to continue firing until a little over 8 minutes into the flight, really doing the heavy lifting now, getting the crew into orbit.
Everything continues to look nominal on both first and second stages. As I mentioned before, the first stage will be making a landing on one of our drone ships, which is currently parked a couple hundred miles off the coast of Florida in the Atlantic Ocean. So we can see now that
SpaceX trajectory nominal.
Good confirmation there that we have good trajectory.
Bueno, 5 minutos desde el despegue.
The second stage now traveling over 5,400
Momentáneamente está
miles
saliendo
per hour.
todo según lo previsto.
Crew is pulling a little more than 1 G right now. That's going to continue to ramp up, peaking just before we get to second stage cutoff here in just a few minutes from now.
First stage will be performing 2 separate burns, a re-entry burn where we reignite 3 of the Merlin M1D engines on the first stage. We ignite the center engine into radial engines to help slow it down as it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere. And then the second final burn, and that will be the landing burn on our drone ship.
And the single MVAC engine that you see.
Trajectory nominal.
The single MVAC engine that you see on the right of your screen is continuing to fire. We did hear another call out that trajectory is nominal. Crew heading in the direction that they are supposed to be. This single engine can produce over 220,000 pounds of thrust in the vacuum of space. Now over 200 kilometers in altitude. We will start to hit events now in a rapid succession as the first stage continues to make its way back to Earth and the second stage continues its burn. Just a couple minutes left in that burn.
For those of you just joining us, just over 6.5 minutes ago, our 4 Crew-5 astronauts launched from Kennedy Space Center in Florida, and they are now making their way into orbit on the second stage inside Crew Dragon.
Trajectory nominal.
Which we're hearing that the trajectory on that is nominal.
Dragon copy.
They are safe inside Dragon Endurance, whereas the first stage on the left-hand side of your screen is making its way back to Earth. We are coming up to the re-entry burn, which, as I said before, we ignite 3 of the 9 Merlin engines.
Se aproxima el encendido de 3 de los 9 motores multiuno-D en la primera etapa para disminuir la velocidad del impacto con las capas más densas de la atmósfera. Ahí está, encendido de 3 motores, el central, los más de los costados.
And as that entry burn completes, we'll be in the final different abort phases here shortly, which essentially correspond to areas along the very northeastern seaboard of the U.S.
Stage 1 entry burn shut down.
Y apagado.
Great news, that entry burn was shut down.
Ahora se empieza a dirigir aerodinámicamente gracias a la rejilla aerodinámica de que, como ven, van girando para conseguir su aterrizaje en la barcaza Just Read Instructions.
Everything continues to look nominal for both the first and second stages.
And the crew with the second stage still attached is now traveling over 13,000 miles per hour.
We're about 10 seconds away from SECO 1.
Copy, Shannon.
Bueno, se viene el aterrizaje y se viene el apagado del motor de la segunda etapa, que siempre ocurre más o menos al mismo tiempo. En este caso se apagará primero el motor, luego aterrizará la primera etapa. Bueno, apagado del motor de la segunda etapa, órbita correcta, y se viene el aterrizaje. Bueno, se perdió la señal de la primera etapa. Veamos si tenemos imágenes. Ya se encendió el motor para aterrizar. Ahí tenemos imágenes en vivo desde la primera etapa. que va bien dirigida hacia la barcaza justo tras Instructions. Y aterrizaje de esta primera etapa. Bueno, se estrenó muy bien, un lanzamiento tripulado, un aterrizaje bastante bien sobre la barcaza JRTI. Bueno, la primera etapa cumplió su trabajo y la segunda etapa también. Ahora en unos minutos se separará la cápsula de la segunda etapa. De ahí hay que esperar hasta mañana para ver el acoplamiento. Pero en el transcurso de ese tiempo la cápsula está realizando múltiples encendidos para poder tener un buen encuentro con la estación espacial.
We did hear that the crew has been successfully inserted into a good orbit. Again, the crew is still attached to the second stage.
We are expecting stage separation to occur in just over a minute from now, about 1 minute and 8 seconds. And that's when the second stage will separate from the Dragon trunk.
Se aproxima la separación de la cápsula.
Dragon trunk is the part of hardware where we are able to house the cargo that is able to be exposed to the vacuum of space, as well as the solar panels which help power Dragon while it is on orbit. Again, that stage separation is now coming up in about 30 seconds. After stage separation, we will have nose cone deployment. Now that Dragon is in the vacuum of space, we will be able to open the nose cone and expose that forward hatch, which is what is utilized to dock autonomously with the International Space Station.
And that nose cone does stay closed for the flight uphill to help protect all of the guidance, navigation, and control sensors. We are standing by for second stage separation.
Ahí está, separación de la cápsula.
And there is separation.
Dragon separation confirmed.
Bueno, el cohete cumplió con su misión. La cápsula se encuentra en órbita correcta. Y tendremos nuevos tripulantes en la estación espacial el día de mañana cuando sea la llegada de la cápsula.
And while October 3rd may belong to the main girls, October 5th will forever belong to Crew-5. Godspeed, Endurance. Cheers.
Awesome. Thank you so much to the Falcon team. That was
y veíamos la cápsula Dragon usar su RCS.
And one veteran astronaut who's pretty happy to be back as well. Let's see what you got to say, Crew-5.
Falcon team, it was a smooth ride, and I see all the three happy faces here back in 0G, and I appreciate all the help to give us a smooth ride and training, and thank you so much.
Bueno, gente, lanzamiento exitoso. Ahora queda mañana ver el acoplamiento. Quizás esté en directo. No lo sé, pero ya lo informaré por Twitter. Y los espero dentro de menos de 7 horas para transmitir otro lanzamiento de SpaceX. Y es que se lanza finalmente hoy. Ahorita de la misión Starlink 429. Y mañana tendremos otro lanzamiento por parte de SpaceX, que serán de los satélites Galaxy 33 y Galaxy 34. Ese sería mañana, pero vendría a ser a las 23:07 UTC. Ese es el lanzamiento, día de mañana.
as well as...
Dragon South 9C, thanks for the words. Had a great ride. Have a good mission.
Sí, qué buena gente. No me despido. Momentáneamente exitoso, aunque da el acoplamiento. Bueno gente, nos vemos en el... Nos vemos en el siguiente lanzamiento.
Just heard our first twin dart tone,
Adiós.
indicating the crew is in space.
Dehumidifier activation and service section Draco checkups. Expected loss of signal, New Hampshire.
Dragon copy.
And Kate, it did look like we were getting our